If you are looking for a book that is going to change your mind and is going to literally change everything you thought you knew about success and what success actually looks like, this right here. We're going to talk about The One Thing by Gary Keller. All right, this book, guys, I cannot speak highly enough. I cannot go on about this book more than I do. In fact, I launched an entire reading challenge around this specific book. You can actually check that out if you go to readwithcmh.com. That's in the link below. You can grab that. And it's because this book is so powerful. I wanted to be able to share the wisdom in this book because it will literally, as it did mine, will change your life. And it's basically built around the premise of we need to establish what the one thing is. And Gary says this, it's the one thing that by doing so will make everything else easier and or unnecessary. And so let me backtrack and tell you a little bit about Gary and why this book is so profound. So Gary is the founder of Keller-Williams, which is a real estate company. They're actually the largest real estate company in the United States. They started just a small little regional chain here in my backyard in Austin, Texas. So Gary, like most people, started out into the world thinking, this is what success looks like. You run around like a crazy person and you try to juggle all the things and you wake up in the morning, and Gary was actually listening to like inspirational music music before his workday, just trying to get jacked up enough to succeed, right? And I talk about people that are just down in caffeine all day long, and it's the same premise. And Gary had success. It's not that it can't work, but he also found himself extremely ill, all right? And that was a part that resonated with me on such a deep level because that was my story, right? I established and found myself scaling a multiple seven-figure business in my mid-20s and doing all the things that I dreamed about, and that all came crashing when I had my health crisis. So to me, it hit on a very, very deep level, a very personal level, and this is why I love this book so much. So what Gary discovered and what he ended up doing was kind of redetermining what success actually looks like, because this can't be it. There has to be a better way to do this. And so he just started doing less and trying to redefine things. And what he found was that thinking big actually requires focusing small. It doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your dreams and aspirations. It means that you have to focus small on the things that are actually going to move you forward towards the big things that you're trying to accomplish. So, kind of in all that, Gary realized in this new approach, focusing small, doing less, is that he started having more success and getting better results in spite of doing things, not because of doing more things, right? So a huge breakthrough. He gives an illustration that I thought was really, really powerful, but he talks about the domino effect, right? And so we all know what that is. Like we kind of conceptually understand what that is, but let me break it down in terms of what he talks about in the book. Every domino has the ability to knock down another domino that's 50% larger than the one before, right? So just imagine dominoes lined up and you could knock down one that's 50% larger than the one before. So here's the deal. In very short sequence, like within, the first like 30 or 40 or something to that effect, you could knock down a domino, even starting with a normal sized domino. By the time you got to that last one, right, within again 30 to 40 dominoes, you're already knocking down a domino that's the size of a distance from the earth to the moon. It's unbelievable, right? And so it's just to illustrate that effectively we underestimate the power of figuring out what that one first domino is. Because if we can figure out what that one first one is, we create amazing potential if we just do the little things and focus on what's the next one thing, what's the next one thing, what's the next one thing. And we underestimate the power of that. So it was really to illustrate kind of the essence of that. So Gary also talks about what he calls the 6 lies of success. And so I'm gonna walk you through kind of each one of them, but I absolutely encourage you to read the book and learn more about each one in particular. But the first one is everything matters equally. All right, so we tend to write down on our list. We have these to-do lists, and we love our list, right? We tend to, have everything on our list. We don't view them and prioritize them in terms of this is important. This has to get done. I can push this. It's just if I don't get all of my list done, then the day was crap, right? I didn't get through, and we fall into taskmaster mode. That's what I call it. I always tell people you have to divorce your taskmaster. So that's a huge one of the lies that he talks about. The next is multitasking. There's scientific evidence, and Gary talks about it in the book, that We know this. Multitasking is just crap. It just doesn't fundamentally work the ways that we like for it to. The next is discipline, and how discipline is overrated. And he talks about how you want to focus on building success habits, the habits of successful people, not relying on discipline. More successful people do not have more discipline than you. That's a huge breakthrough for me. I just go drill sergeant in my own head, and maybe you do the same thing. The next is willpower's on call, right? We think we can just flex it anytime we want. Just drink more coffee, willpower, right? And it's a depletable resource, so we have to recognize that. A balanced life. Gary has this amazing concept called counterbalance. And we don't want to strip away the essence of entrepreneurship because it does require extremes. So he talks about this idea called counterbalance that is fundamentally just a game changer when you talk about entrepreneurship. And then the last one of the 6 is that big is bad, that somehow that thinking big or wanting to do things that's big is somehow bad. I don't struggle with that one. I think thinking big is just a way of life. But I understand that it's one of the things that people do think is, oh, that's crazy. There's no way you could ever do that. You have to focus on what you could achieve, right? So another concept Gary talks about, that one of the major takeaways that I have, is that we underestimate the time it takes to shift gears to do things, right? So there's this graph that they show and they draw things up. And I've read this before where like, even if you could, right? So let's say you're working, let's say whatever, and you get a phone call, right? Phone rings, boom, I answer. Well, when I go back to the work that I was doing previously, you lose something like, you could only reclaim like 80% of the efficacy that you had before, whatever you're working on. Plus, it takes the brain about 15 minutes to recalibrate and get focused. So every little time you have a ping or a pong or a bing or a buzz, you can imagine. And the other thing too that we don't consider is that it really exhausts your bandwidth. You're kind of like burning yourself out. And I was like, why am I ADD? Well, dude, because you got bings and buzz and notifications everywhere, right? So we underestimate that, where if we made things really focused and really quiet. I was watching The Last Dance with Michael Jordan and the Bulls' final season, and they said it wasn't the fact that he was more athletic, could jump higher, could shoot the ball, all the things that he did well. The main thing was for him is that he was present. What does that mean? He was focused, right? So they're present, they're focused on what is the task at hand, what's right in front of me, what's the one thing right now, what's the one thing today, and staying on mission. Okay, one of the next major awesome takeaways from this book is Gary has this idea, okay, so how do I figure out what the one thing is, Chris? Like, that's great, but how do I figure out what that is? So Gary talks about that, and he says he wants you to focus on focusing questions. So here's the deal. You get answers based on what? Questions. So getting to the right answer requires you asking the right questions first. So Gary calls these focusing questions. So what you want to do is continuously ask yourself a series of questions going down. Okay, why is that? Okay, but why? I have a 5 why rule. So I go 5 whys deep on anything that I want to do, so I understand the true motive or the true reason behind my desire or my inclination to do those things. A lot of us are just running around trying stuff because the first why, it sounds like, oh, because so-and-so's doing it, right? Because I saw Gary Vee do it online, right? That's why. That's your only why. So you want to really kind of break it down and use focusing questions, the why within the why, to understand the real reason and get your best answer. The brain will do it automatically for you. When questions are asked, right? Think about when you're sitting at trivia and you're hearing other people answer questions and it's not your turn. You're dying to say that because the brain wants to respond to questions, right? So use that to your advantage. So anyway, and I said this before, I want to make sure you guys say it again. The number one focusing question that he brings up, I'm going to read to you here, is what is the one thing such that by doing so will make everything else easier and or unnecessary? So Gary says to focus on priority, not priorities. All right, so very, very important. And this is really, really fundamentally just profound. And this is something you really need to remember because there's a lot of resistance to this. People always push back on this when we talk about this concept. But here's what you have to remember. And this is really, really important. Probably the most important thing for you to take away. So listen, just stay with me. When you say no to something, right? So choosing a one thing, you'd be like, well, what about this, Chris? What about this? I can't just, let my house burn down, right? So no one's saying you should do that. Saying no just means not right now. Saying no just means not right now. Prioritizing something means that you're blocking out adequate time. And Gary talks about you want 4 hours a day on your one thing. Doesn't mean you have to say no to everything else. It doesn't mean you have to go, be a recluse and live inside and only focus on your one thing. It means you are creating bandwidth and reducing the noise to be able to focus on that one thing that is going to change your life and change your business. I love this book, guys. Like I said, it's absolutely my favorite book of all time, business related wise. And I would encourage you guys, highly encourage you guys, to join me for my 7-day reading challenge. We're going to knock out the first 25% of this book in those 7 days. So you knock out a fourth of the book, boom, in 7 days, and I'll give you guidance daily as we go through the book together. If you go to readwithcmh.com, that's readwithcmh.com. Could not recommend this book more. If there's any book you're going to read in this year or any year going forward as an entrepreneur, this is the book to start with. I promise you, you will be absolutely happy that you took the time to do so. If you like these videos, guys, make sure to like and subscribe below. Leave a comment. Tell me what your favorite business book is, and I will see you guys in the Read Challenge and in the next video.